Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
the unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny.
And we're live. Happy Saturday, folks.
Happy Saturday.
My name is Chris Carr.
And I'm Kristen Johnson.
And it is a beautiful day in New England today. The sun is shining. And if you're not watching us and sitting on a beach, all right, we won't hold it against you. But you have your cell phone with you, so, you can click on it. And, I do see some people out there. There's our buddy Greg Koss. How you doing?
Hey, Greg.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And yes, we are good for next week.
Yes, we are.
We'll be doing the Estes Method with Greg on Metaphysical Crossings, his show. You can find on Facebook. Awesome show. Shadow Hunters Paranormal as well. And it's gorgeous. But we got a really good show, so it's worth tuning into, guys. So click on the button. Don't scroll on by. All right, so we've got a couple of characters here with us that have a brand new documentary out. Just came out on Tuesday, and if you're listening to us and can't see our ticker, it is available to stream anywhere. You get streams: Amazon, Google Play, Vudu. It's called Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, and I love this. And I think you're all going to love this as well. Tobe Johnson and Brett Eichenberger, they're the co-producers of this documentary, which again is called Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. They're going to talk about the interviews they had with researchers, eyewitness accounts, extraordinary stories and evidence. They will also discuss historical accounts of Bigfoot and the significance of them within the indigenous cultures, which pretty damn interesting.
Yes, it is. We're very into that ourselves.
This film makes a strong case for the existence of Bigfoot and really asks the viewer to examine the evidence and come to their own conclusions. So let's bring them on, Tobe and Brett. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hey.
Welcome.
How you doing? Welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny.
You're very welcome.
You're in an appropriate place.
Yes, you are. You guys got to see the Bigfoot Ukrainian flag. Everyone.
Yeah.
Chris was, doing that.
I changed our Ukrainian flag. We've had that on since the invasion, and today it sports a Bigfoot.
Yes, it does.
So that is an honor of your presence. So we appreciate you guys coming on. And
absolutely.
We can't wait to talk to you. We want to know, how did this come about? I know you're filmmakers and Bigfoot researchers. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourselves and how this came together.
Yeah, so we started this documentary really at the beginning of the pandemic, and we come from more of a narrative filmmaking background. So we've done a few other features, which are also available on Amazon and whatnot. And Jill and I, who's the producer and writer, she's another producer and writer, decided that, after living in Oregon our entire lives and being fascinated with Bigfoot, that we should do a documentary on it. And we kind of planted the seeds years and years ago. And we, just personally, we were very interested in the subject matter. And so we went to some conferences and got to know some folks and realized that we actually had what we needed in order to start making this film. What we didn't anticipate is the timeline. We thought that, we'd shoot it over the summer and we'd get it out sometime in 2021. And what ended up happening was we started going down that rabbit hole of meeting people that kept, that had different sightings, different experiences, and it kind of tumbled, went on and on and on. And early on in the process, we met Tobe and Daryl, and they really helped. Tobe really helped connect us to a lot of folks with a lot of important and really untold, unheard stories in the Bigfoot community. And so we put together this documentary over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years. And we feature new voices, we feature new perspectives, we feature a different style of filmmaking, I think, than what people are accustomed to when they see Bigfoot documentaries. And, we wanted to kind of insert a different voice into the conversation because, we approach this as believers, and that's even been solidified after doing this talk.
Excellent.
Awesome.
That is really excellent. And the quality of, that trailer alone.
Yeah, the production is amazing.
Is awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is beyond a lot of what, we see out there. And it seems like, you guys definitely took some time in producing and the production end of things, because you're not screwing around. This is good stuff. Toby, how did you get involved? And
I was just thinking, yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking the second chapter of our documentary should be called Not Screwing Around. I think that would be a big seller. So
Right?
Hold on to that one, Brett.
Yeah,
I
like that idea.
Jot that down.
I'll write it
Post-it note.
down. I'll write it down for you.
Okay, there you go. Bigfoot, not screwing around. So this started in the little town of Springfield, Oregon, outside of a Weyerhaeuser lumber town, circa 2005, with my son and I, when we found what we thought was a hoax track in a pretty well-known trailhead. And from that moment, things spiraled for me, and I went down the rabbit hole. I ended up putting on conferences of my own in the little town of Eugene, Oregon, and putting on mini conferences once a month in a sleepy town called Leesburg, Oregon, at a pizza parlor. And it was really at the behest of doing that at this pizza parlor, meeting witnesses once a month, that I started to make these connections with what are called habituators or extended experiencers. I was finding out that I could get a lot closer to the phenomena by leaning in on these people that said they had Bigfoot in their own backyard, which is hard for most people to believe, that Bigfoot is more than one being, that they exist, that they're all over the planet, and that people have multiple sightings. That all is true. It just took me a while to not care about who believed me. And so I spun my wheels for a good 5 years trying to get validation from, the Newtonian science, from those that are in academia. And it wasn't adding up. They would not go along for the ride the way I was going on the ride. They wanted me to toe a certain party line. And it was no fun to do it that way. And I got into this to have fun. But when I found out you could have fun and you could have Bigfoot come close to you, relatively very close to you, then that's when I invested all of my time in seeking out people that had these prolonged experiences. And that's where my story with Daryl Adams and Cindy Adams in the town of Cottage Grove, the narrative starts up in Flash of Beauty Part 1.
Oh, that's excellent. It's really cool.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I think we've come a long way since the Patterson Gimlin film that, a lot of us grew up with. And the Bigfoot community has grown right along with it. And now there are a lot of people looking. There are a lot of sightings. You guys present a lot of evidence in this. Do you want to tell us maybe one of the stories that convinced you that this is absolutely real?
I think our best story in the film is at the end of the movie. There's a gentleman based out of Vernal, Utah, named Daryl Wilson, and Daryl was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and so he went up to far western Alaska to a little village named St. Mary's and visited his daughter, his grandchildren, and at the time his son-in-law. And while they were up there, Daryl and his son-in-law were out on a boat on the Andreski River. Andreski, it's kind of hard to say, river, and they had a 10 to 20 minute sighting that they observed through binoculars. They were able to watch different behaviors. The hairy man, as they call it up there in that part of Alaska, was eating blueberries. They noticed how fast it was moving on the tundra, and the tundra is, for normal able-bodied people, is really pretty hard to walk on. And I don't want to give anything away, but it changed Daryl's life dramatically. And that definitely by far is one of the most profound sightings and interviews that I've ever seen. And we were very fortunate to be the ones that got to interview Daryl on camera for the very first time. So I think that's the one that really, for me, has staying power and has really impacted us as people and as filmmakers.
Mhm.
Excellent. You mentioned Newtonian physics before.
Yes.
And what is it that presses against what we'll call it the old school scientific method versus your experience that makes you feel that Bigfoot is there?
You want to tackle that, Brett?
Boy, I'm not sure. Give it your best shot and I'll take over.
Okay. Well, when we seem like we're griping about the old school compared to the new school, I challenge them to say that the new school is much older than the old school, and it's us reaching back into, these ancient gifts that we have. Now, I'm skipping ahead to part 2 when I talk like this, but there's something going on with Bigfoot that puts it in the class of the other. I don't need to go there fully. People can read the book or tune in for part 2, but in short, science has been looking for a relic hominid. They've been looking for Gigantopithecus blacki. And that's interesting because it has no divergent big toe, which is a total primate attribute. And this is a plain-footed human-type foot that they've been looking at all along. But what they haven't been telling the public is tantamount to a sort of perjury. They have been omitting the facts to the public that most people see human-like behavior off of something that looks very human, hence why a lot of times we don't have a body. The people are so captivated by the humanity of what they're seeing that it has nothing to do with fear of them being hurt. It's fear of their paradigm being shattered. And all at once, everything that you've been told, you have a red pill crammed down your throat, and everything comes crashing down like Neo. And so, when I go to these conferences and they skip this part of the lecture, it's as though they're telling people that they can go out and look for Bigfoot and maybe they'll be seeing a wild animal. That's not at all my experience. And it's a sort of irresponsibility that once in a while I lose my temper over. But in short, these people are scared of what they're looking into. And they've told me point blank, if it is what you say it is, I wouldn't look into it anymore. So what the hell are we looking into? Well, I think it's something way beyond flesh and blood. And I'll let you take it from there, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, just to build upon your Gigantopithecus story, I mean, as far as I'm aware, unless there's been any more discoveries recently, the only proof that they have of Gigantopithecus that they've built this whole idea on is a jawbone. That's it. There's no skeleton. They're estimating this on the size of the jawbone, and the Bigfoot community has substantial evidence that is being ignored by the scientific community. And I think it's being ignored by the scientific community because people are afraid of being ridiculed. And we talk about this in the documentary. We have a Yale-educated psychologist, Dr. Michael Adams, who talks about how folks, in order to move the needle, you need to be a pioneer. You got to be aggressive. You got to go out there and you've got to risk it, and, thank God for guys like Grover Krantz and Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who are at, Grover was at Washington State University, Meldrum at Idaho State University. These are recognizable academic institutions, and they're serious about their science, and they're going out there and they're bringing back evidence. Meldrum's even built his own, Bigfoot skeleton, which is very impressive. So, there are people out there, but we need more. We need people that are willing to, risk the ridicule and go out there and say, hey, the evidence is overwhelming. And it really is. And the thing about, where we're coming from with this film is, for us filmmakers, the emotional evidence says a lot. It says a lot. And people aren't talking about the trauma. People aren't talking about the aftermath of the sighting. It's like you had a sighting, it was scary, and that was that. And that's not how it works. We're talking to hunters that have post-traumatic stress disorder because of what they've seen. These guys are very intelligent, reputable people who have seen just about every animal you could imagine in the woods, save for maybe a cougar, which it seems to me that there's more Bigfoot sightings than cougar sightings. But they know what they saw. They know exactly what they saw. And what they saw is keeping them from going back into the woods. And that says a lot. And these are classic sightings.
My goodness. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, we totally agree with you. And I see the same sort of narrative in the paranormal, in ufology. A lot of people, I don't believe in ghosts because it hasn't happened to them yet.
Exactly.
When you have that experience that you can't explain, that the Newtonian physics doesn't seem to follow.
Being paranormal in itself,
You go, oh yeah, there is something to this, and not everybody has that experience. But when it happens, it's mind blowing. It's more than evidence at that point.
I can see them having PTSD over that.
Right. And
I can understand.
There's a person who would recognize things in the woods. They're going to know. Hunters know what they're looking for.
Like
they've seen it 1,000 times. They know exactly.
We have a question.
Yeah. As far as cougar sightings, I think you mostly have to go to bars to find them.
Whoa!
Oh my gosh! I was going to say,
I started, guys.
I had to break the seriousness there a little bit.
Yeah,
Sorry, guys. But we did have one question out here from David Lee Wilson asks, do you have any DNA samples that have been tested? I guess that's
yes, we do. So we don't get into this in the film very much, but yes, DNA samples have been collected by multiple sources. Dr. Melba Ketchum is one of those individuals who has had DNA samples and has had them tested, and they have come back as a interestingly enough, 10,000 years old, a common human mother, and an unknown male father. Those are the results that came back.
Wow.
So to be able to expand upon that with additional information.
Not too heavily, but in short, the DNA always comes back as contaminated by humans. And so it's been passed off and ignored because of that fact. But what seems to be happening is that they're looking at the data and not seeing what it's actually saying. Yes, it does have human DNA in it along with something else. So you see to do a DNA test is a fairly lengthy process to collect it. It all needs to be filmed. You need to do it correctly. You need to store it correctly. And then you need to pay for it to get analyzed. And that takes funding. So operations out there that have funding are more successful at doing that. But then again, they always get blamed for not doing it properly, no matter how many, boxes they're checking. So what we did in the Al Moon lab is we just collected everything microscopically and started there. And we got our confirmation from orthopedic surgeons. We got our confirmation from a sonographer. We got our confirmation from a veterinarian up in Canada who works with the Olympic Project. Then we looked at the voice analytics and put them through something called spectrogram and looked at some of the possible language and vocalizations that we got. So there's all sorts of processes that you have to get through before you send in the big guns, because nobody has endless funding for this. But that gets into dollars and cents, and I think a lot of times that comes to play, and we don't even know that as Bigfooters. But as long as they keep distracting us, they have to keep these programs going covertly somehow to vouch for, funding. So they just keep them prolong. The studies keep going, they keep going. But there's strange stuff that we do not know. Just if I could give a small example here, I talked to Ken Walker, who is the number one taxidermist in all the world twice running, and almost the third time this year. And he got a gig at the Smithsonian, and he worked down in the basement and was doing a project as a taxidermist. I forget what he was working on, but he got to see a ice age cave bear that came from Alaska. This thing has been extinct. We have the bones, the proof that this cave bear exists. I don't think it was the typical cave bear that they talk about. It was a different version, but he saw the skull. And so this is something walking the earth in the last 20 years. So these are something, the regular Joe will never see the light of day of this at the Smithsonian for whatever reason. Exactly. And again, the Smithsonian is to blame all the time for removing large bones. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
We're right with you, Tobe.
Seem to disappear to the Smithsonian, never to see the light again. So in saying that, do you think the government is well aware of Bigfoot?
Yes, we tackled that in the documentary. We have an individual that was courageous enough to go on camera, albeit we have disguised his voice and his image. And it took us about 3 or 4 months to actually get him to agree to do it. But he's a former Army intelligence analyst, and he talks about a government program up near Seattle. I'm not going to mention any military bases, but you can do your own research. But there's a military base up in Seattle that has an elite sniper team that goes out into the woods and takes care of problem animals. So, and those animals are brought to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for autopsies. Now,
of course they are.
we can't verify this, but we did do a background check on this individual, and everything, he said as to who he was checked out. So, it's important to us to try and verify as much as possible for this particular documentary, and we thought his interview was very credible. He talks about how he believes, in his experience, that these things are being controlled more for economic reasons than for anything else. And some of these Bigfoot tend to kind of get a little too close to civilization for their liking, and they don't want to create this situations where people are afraid to recreate in these areas. We're talking about, the Cascades of Oregon and Washington. And also there, years and years and years ago, there was a spotted owl controversy here in the Pacific Northwest that cost loggers and families billions and billions of dollars over this little owl, which was important to save. And that's not what I'm trying to say, but there's some fear that the discovery of a Sasquatch could basically halt anything and everything that had to do with the timber industry, and it could cause somewhat of an economic meltdown similar to this spotted owl. So those are kind of the theories behind some of the population control. I have no doubt that the government knows about it. We also show an image of a map that the Bureau of Land Management had where they tracked Bigfoot sightings and kept track of them. I mean, there's no question in my mind that they know about them, they're aware of them, and it's so much easier to keep it a legend for them.
And if people want to see a copy of this map Brett was talking about, you can go on YouTube and look at my 2010 YouTube channel underneath Oregon Sasquatch Symposium. And I was given the exact copy of this map by a guy named Ron Braun around 2010. He had a sighting near Coos Bay, Oregon. After he got back to his field office in Veneta, Oregon, the secretary met him in the parking lot with a rolled up tube. And this is an official, almost 3-foot long map with a key printing 5 or 6 different types of sightings going all the way down from, I believe, Astoria to Gold Beach on the Pacific side of Oregon. Don, what's interesting about this even further is the reason I don't have this map is that Don's son called me 3 days later and left a voicemail saying, my dad needs that map back. He's going to get fired if I don't get it. So I put that in FedEx, and before I did, I recorded it and threw it up on YouTube, I guess, which was my way of keeping a copy. But anyway, that map is circulated on the west coast of Oregon. I didn't know that before I met Brett, that anybody else had seen that. So really interesting tie-ins between what Brett's finding out and what I'm finding out.
Absolutely. What is the name of your YouTube channel?
Well, this is an old, I used to have it back when YouTube started and before podcasts. I had a YouTube channel called Oregon Sasquatch Symposium.
Okay.
And there's some old archive videos on there, and that should be one of the videos of this map.
Great. Wonderful.
It's excellent. I just want to give a couple quick shout outs too to some of our friends out there commenting and liking the show. The Wizard's Table is our good
The
friend Ken
Wizard's Table. We have
Allen.
to sing that because he's
No,
big
I
with the
believe
bunny.
he is on this afternoon at 6:00 after us. I see Katie Stafford out there. Hello, Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Katie and KD Stafford, of course, the
It's
Supernatural
the box up there somewhere.
manufacturers of ITC equipment and great researchers. And another question from David. He says, so your DNA testing points toward a human woman giving birth to a half human.
Hybrid.
Where do we go from here? Yes, I mean, that's what it's pointing to. I don't know really enough about the DNA and what the research is saying about that. This is something we're going to get into in part 2, the paranormal Bigfoot. And this goes back to biblical times. It goes back to, the Old Testament talks about giants. Somebody recently pointed out that there are, somebody discovered Bigfoot in the Sistine Chapel paintings, the Nephilim. So we start going down quite a bit of a rabbit hole here that I would prefer to get into a little bit down the line once our second film is released and we have a little bit more information. But yeah, it's definitely a mystery. It's definitely
interesting. No, but inside the Sistine Chapel, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Hybrid animals have always kind of been a thing through history and turn out like in religions and the occult and all sorts of things, these sort of hybrids between animal and human. I think that's fascinating. Was it always the plan to do 2 parts? Did you guys decide this from the beginning?
No, it was not. And as a matter of fact, the trailer that you guys showed earlier today was the first trailer that came out, and that was it was supposed to be a teaser, although it's an over 3-minute teaser. And when we put that together, that the idea was we were going to be covering more topics, including the paranormal. And what ended up happening was about maybe 3/4 of the way through, maybe halfway through, we decided that because we have so much footage and so much good stuff, that what we needed to do is to cut this into 2 parts. And that mirrors the Bigfoot community to a certain extent, because there certainly are the apers out there that believe that Bigfoot is nothing but flesh and blood. And then there's the folks that have the open mind about being a paranormal creature and having these paranormal abilities. And so we don't want to skew the data. The majority of the folks that we spoke to had a paranormal component to their sightings. And so we thought, you know what, let's take those and just put them into the paranormal Bigfoot, and let's address all of this other stuff, because there is a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. So we just felt like that was the better way to tell the story.
It is a lot to unpack, and it actually, that is 2 of the questions I had planned for you. Of course, the most common one that we come across in talking to researchers or just paranormal folk in general will be like, well, are they interdimensional?
Exactly.
Are they flesh and blood? Are they some kind of combination of these things?
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to comment further on that, or kind of let the evidence present itself?
Should I tell him the Jeff Boiler story, Brett? That kind of puts it puts things in context of something else going on. Jeff Boiler wasn't interviewed for this part of the documentary, at least, but he's someone I spoke to early on. And Jeff pulled me aside. He was a deputy sheriff near Sisters, Oregon, and had some vacation time coming to him. On the South Sister, he went for a hike, brought his sidearm with him, and headed up a mountain. He thought he saw an elk in the distance. The elk turned and looked at him, and the elk had a pointy head and shoulders and was kind of bright red. He said he saw a caveman, and as he looked at a caveman, he opened his jaw in disbelief. This thing mimicked him and opened its jaw in disbelief. And he turned his head to the side, like, what the hell do I have here right now? This thing turned its head to a side. And it's at that point that Jeff told me privately, he goes, this thing wasn't copying me. That's what I tell the normal people. He goes, this thing was making fun of me. He goes, I could tell as a cop who's had to read body language all my life. that this thing was outgunning me, outplaying me, letting me, it followed me in. And that's when I knew I had a perpetrator, a human. So he thought about grabbing his gun, and it was at the thought of him reaching for his gun that this thing bolted. Now the story gets more interesting. You can watch it on Paranormal Witness episode season 1 called Watcher in the Woods. It tells a story of Jeff Boiler. But what's going on if you have something that can not only is hyper intuitive about humanity, but possibly looking into things that animals shouldn't access, like your mind, your decisions. And what's up with this humanity of the thing? Bright red. We talk about things that are bright red in our documentary too. So, they come in different shapes and sizes, but if their brains are able to do what Jeff's describing, it's no wonder we can't get any proof. We don't have permission to get proof. It seems to be on their level at all times. And maybe they can access time different than us. And that is why they can play games better than we can.
Sure.
I would totally agree with you that there. David Lee Wilson says this points to mind reading and possibly mind control, and we'd have to agree. Katie mentioned that shapeshifters using portals and that sort of thing. What is sort of the phenomena that other people might just say is paranormal that seems to surround these Bigfoot sightings? In addition to what you mentioned, of course.
I mean, there are all kinds of different reports. Ron Moorhead's daughter, Ron Moorhead is famous for his Sierra sounds that he recorded, and we interviewed Ron Moorhead in this film.
Yeah.
And he'll be prominent in the second film as well, because we really believe that his book, The Quantum Bigfoot, spells it out. And Ron goes back to more of a science-based theory with quantum mechanics. But let me go back to your question about the phenomena. So Ron's daughter, she thinks that she witnessed a Sasquatch shape-shifting into a wolf, perhaps. That's one example. I mean, we have there's multiple researchers that have tracked tracks in the snow. They just stop and they don't turn back around. Where did it go? How did it disappear? We've heard stories of people watching them walk into trees, literally walking into trees. There's reports, very prominent reports about UFOs doing the same thing, the exact same thing, flying into mountains. There's a documentary about the connection between UFOs and volcanoes, and they've got very good footage of UFOs flying into mountains. And so what we come back to is this isn't magic. This can be explained by science that we don't understand yet. Mm-hmm. And that science is quantum physics and quantum mechanics. We're just starting to scratch the surface. Scientists are. So this is where we think that these things lay. And what's fascinating to me is that when you start looking at ghost phenomena, Bigfoot phenomenon, a UFO phenomenon, you're starting to make these connections that these beings, these individuals, have the ability to utilize this technology or this science to do whatever it is they want to do. And I believe personally, my personal opinion is that the U.S. government knows about this. Maybe other world governments know about this, and they don't want us to find out about it, because if they did, we'd be really hard to control. So, if we were able to just walk through objects and fly around and do whatever we pleased, it would be we'd be a tough crowd to govern, I guess you could say. So so I think the phenomena is fascinating as it is, really does have a science base. And we're kind of at that turning point right now in human history where we're starting to figure out how to acknowledge it instead of just writing, saying it's magic or demonology or something like that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We definitely agree with you.
Yes.
One common thing that we see is areas that, have a lot of this phenomena have the other phenomena as well, like the Freetown Forest and the Bridgewater Triangle, which is out our way, is known for Bigfoot sightings, is known for UFO sightings, it's known for cults and other weird activity.
Puckwedgies and
Puckwudgies,
Taiwankas.
right? Which are
ghost lights.
which are like the fairy-like creatures.
The Puckwedgies are elementals.
And their name actually stems from indigenous cultures. And one of the things we definitely wanted to talk to you a little bit about is how the indigenous cultures turn up in your documentary and what their view is as what Bigfoot might be.
Tobe, you want to start off on that one?
Sure. My first experience growing up in the Willamette Valley, outside of the Kalapuya Reservation, was dealing with an oral traditionist by the name of Esther Stutzman. And she would go around to universities and schools telling cultural lessons, oral stories of the Kalapuya. And she seemed like the perfect person to approach. But there's a whole understanding when you approach a First Nations person regarding the right time. And that comes up when you're dealing with these phenomena as well. I call it the Taylor effect, as though things are perfectly synced up and made and suited like a tailored suit. And so I didn't really know anything about that circa 2008. And I called Esther up at home and out of the little town of Yoncalla, Washington, or Yoncalla, Oregon. And she told me over the phone, this is not the time to talk about Bigfoot. You need to call me back during such and such time during the proper season. And I think that was 6 months away. Well, I wanted to put on a conference and I needed to fill up seats and put butts in seats. And so I did. I put off the conference to get a hold of Esther and get her booked. And she eventually spoke at the first conference I put on at a community college. But she spoke in great reverence about what they call Chichu Chippy, which is the Kalapuya word for Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And every native will tell something a little bit different. Some will say they're cannibals. Some will say that they're forest spirits. Some will say that they're an elder of the tribe set apart. But they all say one thing: they're more than an animal. And they do so by putting them at the bottom of their totem poles, which is the prized position to put the sacred being. And you see that out here in Vancouver, Canada. You see that out here in Washington State. So, it's a whole different ballgame with Sasquatch and the First Nations people out here in the rainforest. You just have to approach the phenomena differently. You have to approach them differently and kind of wait for them to come to you. So for that was really the last time I worked hand in hand with a Native American. However, there's a guy by the name of Mel Scahan in the documentary. Brett, why don't you tell him about him?
Yeah, so Mel was an incredible individual to interview. And Mel started out, he's a member of the Yakima tribe. Mel started out skeptical. And we opened the film with him. And we wanted to start the movie with the indigenous history. We wanted to kind of set a context that this isn't, Bigfoot wasn't invented in 1967 with the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Right.
Bigfoot's been around for thousands of years. And they go by, almost every tribe on the West Coast, if not North America, has a Bigfoot or a hairy man or a wild man component to their culture. They all go by different names. And so Mel talks about, he was managing the forest. He was a Forest Service manager and on the Yakima Reservation. Yakima Reservation goes all the way over to Mount Adams. And Mount Adams is kind of a sacred place for the indigenous population with lots and lots of Bigfoot and UFO activity. And so Mel talks about how his journey, he kept coming across this evidence in the woods, in the forests, out in the middle of nowhere, to suggest that there was something else going on. I mean, footprints, all kinds of different things. And then he started having actual experiences with Bigfoot. So from Mel, we go into some of the other Pacific Coast tribes. And how they have the wild man. There's a tribe that believes that they may actually have DNA from Sasquatch.
Oh, wow.
This particular tribe has, a lot of individuals has kind of an auburn reddish hair. And then we also talked about early settlers and explorers. We talk about an artist named Paul Kane who really wanted to go up and paint Mount St. Helens, but he couldn't get any native guides to take him there. Even with large bribes, they wouldn't take him there because of the skookums. And we also talk about a missionary named E. Walker, who was out on the east side of the Cascades. And he wrote a letter. There was a letter found that he wrote to a reverend in New England that talked about the superstitions of the local natives. And what he does is he goes, it reads like a modern Bigfoot account of, he talks about the large feet. He talks about how they live on the mountain that, has perpetual snow. So it was really important for us to set that historical context. And the best way to do it was with the natives and their hundreds of years, thousands of years of history.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so much of that is documented. They certainly saw a lot.
Hairy man, all kinds of different names for each tribe, like you were saying. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you feel that Bigfoot has a specific language? We see the shows where people are howling, they're banging on trees, and this kind of thing, and friends that bang on trees, and we kind of hope to do that ourselves this summer, and that sort of thing
down the street.
But want to know, like, if that showed up in your research as well?
Yeah.
Can I take that real quick, Brett?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a backlog of Patreon episodes I just released. And so if people go to Strange Brow Radio, that's spelled B-R-A-U, Strange Brow Radio. It was a live show I used to do in German bars. I just released a 3-hour episode with Ron Moorhead and cryptolinguist Scott Nelson. I think it's about 3.5 hours, actually.
Wow.
And after about the 60-minute mark, we go into a deep dive about language. Now, that's all the Scott studies. That's all he did in the Navy as a cryptolinguist, was listen to cans on his ears to possible infiltration from other countries, including the Russians and the Chinese, but a whole lot more. So he's a professor, I believe. Where's he at? Out of Nebraska, Brett?
Missouri. Kansas City.
And he's also in the documentary. But one of the things he never mentions, in at least part one, is that he's worked hand in hand not only with Ron, but coming up with the SPA, which is the standard, because we have no standard, but it is at least a start of a Sasquatch phonetic alphabet. And I believe if you type in Scott Nelson, cryptolinguist, Sasquatch phonetic alphabet, or SPA, you will get to a diagram of the Sierra sounds. And he has broken those down into what are called morpheme streams, which gives you a way of understanding that there is a language and not just vocalizations. So again, his discipline is language. He hears language based upon what are called morpheme streams, and now is trying to break down that there is a provable language here based upon things like terminal endings. When you hear a Sasquatch speak, we'll just call it speech. These beings are speaking. They're doing so in groups of one or more, usually two or more. Mm-hmm. And when they speak, they use something called a terminal ending a lot of times. That is basically a way of us, when we speak, saying, I've made my point. I'm going to put an exclamation point on it and pass it over to you to respond to. They do that. And you can hear that with a phonetic huff or huh sound after one of these expressions, especially in these Sierra sounds. Now, we got those too in Cottage Grove as well. They just haven't gone through the right ears yet, because I've been paying so much respect to not only this documentary, but getting this book out. But without Scott Nelson, there really is nobody else besides a guy named David Ellis to look at the possibility of language, a new language.
It's fascinating. Do you think that there are different species of Bigfoot? And how does the skunk ape play into this? Like, I know our guest Thursday, he talks about cryptids, but he's not really a Bigfoot guy. He's at a conference, and I believe the conference it's in Florida, is like the skunk ape and Bigfoot conference.
Yeah, so without question, there's different species of them. There's different species, there's different colors, there's different personalities. The skunk ape, I think, there's a famous photo. He type in Skunk Ape, Florida, you'll come up with it. But the image that individual got of that skunk ape looks pretty different than what we're accustomed to here on the West Coast. We had the chance to go out to a reservation in the Midwest, and out there they have the Sitongas, and the Sitongas. We actually even saw some photographs of the Sitongas while we were out there, and which will remain private for the foreseeable future. But they have canines that stick up from their lower jaw. We have a photograph in the documentary that a woman took from a plane. There's some discussion as to whether it's real or not, but it has auburn hair and it looks very different than some of the other Bigfoot. But regardless of whether it's real or not, her father had a sighting that I spoke of earlier that he talks about the same description. Many people up there talk about that same description of the hairy man. So it's consistent with other sightings and other experiences with the natives in Western Alaska. So yeah, these when you put these descriptions together next to Patty, which is arguably authentic and the most famous Bigfoot of them all, you do come up with markedly different looking Sasquatch, and the conclusion is that it's a different species. There are different species.
Yeah, we agree with you, definitely.
Seems that way.
It does.
It definitely seems that way. I know we only have an hour with you guys, and I wanted to just hit on a couple of questions real quick from our audience before we wrap things up. Greg Koss had asked, are there any close to Mount Rainier?
Yes, I can cover that here real quick, and then Tobe, you can talk a little bit more about that because you're up in Washington. But yeah, there's definitely some up at Mount Rainier. And what's very interesting is we've heard reports that there are different clans or tribes throughout the Cascades. The ones near Mount St. Helens are really kind of cranky. The ones at Mount Rainier, I've heard, are kind of a mixture. And then the further south you go, it seems like the mellower they are.
Interesting.
And then, Tobe, you might be able to expand upon that, depending on some of the folks that you know that are kind of in the shadow of Mount Rainier.
And near the shadow of Mount Rainier is a gal by the name of Barb Shoup, who eventually will come out on our documentary. And she's just doing her own thing with her and her golden retriever. She has a small membership to her Bigfoot group out of Greenwater. I believe it's Greenwater or Enumclaw, Washington. And they do retreats 4 times a year, I think, starting like right now to the fall. And each time they have something happen at these retreats that last generally about a week. Right now, I know that there is a huge thing going on underneath Mount Rainier. Next level tree weaves. That's one of the things that you look for when you're out there doing this is we see a lot of what look like fresh green vine maple that has been tightly woven to archways. Sometimes the trees are planted and they use other vine maple to sprig them together. Brett has seen this himself at the property. But these are magnificent, almost 8 feet tall by 5 feet wide and go over the entire canopy deep in the forest. So Mount Rainier is a very active spot, not only for Bigfoot, but for, I think Kenneth Arnold even flew over Mount Rainier after he left Mount Adams and had his flying saucer stuff. So lots of strangeness in Mount Rainier. Don't go up there alone unless, you want to have a wild ride.
Yeah, no.
It sounds like some high strangeness there.
Yeah.
We're going to go.
Courtney had a quick question. She says, Bigfoot is intriguing. I was having a conversation with someone. Do you agree that they choose who lets them be seen?
Yeah.
I do believe they see us more than we know. It's like spirit ghosts and they know their intention. And that is something we talk about in reference to spirits. And sometimes people see an apparition. UFOs. You have a group of people together. 3 people see him, 4 people do not see the apparition.
Exactly.
Is Bigfoot similar?
Yes. In my opinion, yes, absolutely. We've heard this time and time again. Chad and Austin are featured in our documentary, and these two guys were up at a lake in Southern Oregon near the border of California, and they went out there specifically to record survival videos for YouTube. I mean, these guys grew up in the forest. They know the forest. They, feel like they're safe in the forest. So anyways, one day they're down there, during that trip, they're down there at the lake's edge, and they look across the lake and they see a Sasquatch, and it's juvenile, child. And Chad and Austin just happened to have left their cameras and their phones back up at camp. And they believe, and they talk about this in the documentary, they truly believe that they never would have seen it if they had cameras in hand. And we've heard this from so many different people. I, in fact, had a UFO sighting with my wife, Jill, out in Vernal, Utah. And, I always have my phone with me, always. And I left it in the car. And sure enough, here comes a UFO right out of a cloud. So, again, this goes back to everything being connected. I think it's connected. I think sometimes these things do want to show themselves to you, but they don't want to be recorded doing it.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is great. That is great.
Yeah.
And with that, I've just got one more comment, and we'll wrap things up and let people know where they can find the documentary. Yes. And also, Toby, I believe you have books on a book series. Greg Koss said, keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times. Well, that seems like a pretty good idea.
That's awesome.
In the face of some of these larger creatures. But the film is out now. People can go and stream this afternoon. They can stream it tonight. It's called Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. Available pretty much anywhere you would stream things. Vudu, Amazon, Google Play, all those places.
Sure.
What else would you like to tell people about, where they can find you and learn about your research?
Follow us on our Facebook page. We have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and we're going to keep you guys updated on any other events. We have a Kickstarter going on right now for our sequel, and we hope to have the sequel out probably a little bit less than a year from now. Next spring would be the goal, so you can check that out as well. And we're just going to keep on telling these incredible stories.
Yes, please do. It's unbelievable. We love you guys.
We look forward to watching it. I think we'll be watching it over the weekend because we really do enjoy these things, and I think we'll learn a lot.
We loved having you as guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Good luck with the film. Go and check these guys out. Toby Johnson, Brett Eichenberger. Great job, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
I'm just going to put you out of the stream, wrap things up.
Okay. Thanks, Chris and Krista.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And guys, we just had an hour today, so it's a little bit shorter episode.
Yep. But
we really appreciate you joining in. Thank you. Couldn't get to all your questions. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you, Courtney, Greg, Liz, Anne Marie Young, Katie Wallace, Katie Stafford. Good to see you out there.
Great to see you.
And everyone.
Got the damn it doll right behind me somewhere.
That's right. We have your damn it doll.
There it is.
And we use it.
I use it a lot.
So thank you so much. We'll be back next Thursday for Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast. And of course,
we'll be on Saturday. Greg Koss's show as well.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We were just talking about this on Wednesday.
Yes.
Look for Shadow. It's actually Metaphysical Crossing.
Yes.
We'll be doing the Estes method. Again, returning to Greg's show, and we're looking forward to that. And follow our pages, to see information about that if you're not sure where to go. Facebook.com/Bigfoot and the Bunny, and we'll put that in a few places.
Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast on YouTube. Please.
Yes, Dark Horse Paranormal Productions actually on YouTube. Please get out there and like that. We're trying to build that thing. So thank you again so much. Have a great week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.